Elena Vance thought her biggest problem was choosing between champagne and wine for tonight's gallery opening, until she walked into that renovated cannery and saw the ghost from her past standing on stage. The mysterious investor, who now held her family's financial future in his hands, wasn't just any successful businessman. He was Marcus Thorne, the man she'd abandoned 7 years ago when she was young, pregnant, and terrified. But the real shock came when he introduced his 7-year-old daughter to the crowd, a beautiful little girl with Elena's eyes and Elena's smile, the child she'd been forced to give up to save the man she loved from prison. Now Marcus owned the debt on her father's country club, wielding the power to destroy everything the Vance family had built for generations. And he had no idea that the woman who broke his heart was standing in his gallery, watching their daughter for the first time in 7 years. What happens when a mother returns to claim the family she sacrificed everything to protect, only to discover that her greatest act of love might have been her most devastating mistake? If you're watching this story unfold, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this tale of forbidden love, family secrets, and second chances is just beginning. Elena Vance stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her designer office, watching the late afternoon sun cast golden shadows across Port Haven's harbor. Her fingers traced the edge of an elegant cream-colored invitation that had arrived that morning. The old cannery was reopening tonight, transformed into something new by a mysterious investor who'd bought the abandoned building 6 months ago. The cannery. Her heart squeezed tight. She hadn't thought about that place in years. Well, that wasn't true. She thought about it every day, but she'd gotten good at pushing those memories down deep where they couldn't hurt her. Elena. Her father's voice cut through her thoughts like ice. Leo. Vance stepped into her office without knocking, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit pressed to perfection. At 68, he still commanded every room he entered. "You look pale. Are you feeling well?" She turned from the window, smoothing her cream-colored dress. "I'm fine, Daddy." "Good, because tonight is crucial for our family." He moved to her desk, picking up the invitation. "This mystery investor could save the country club. Our membership is down, the building needs repairs, and frankly, we're running out of options." Elena nodded, though the knot in her stomach grew tighter. The Vance family had owned the Port Haven Country Club for 3 generations. It was their legacy, their pride. But times had changed, and so had the town. "I've arranged for Preston to escort you tonight," Leo continued. "He's well-connected, charming. The kind of man who could help secure your future." Preston Walsh. 32 years old, inherited wealth and the personality of wet cardboard. Elena had been avoiding his calls for weeks, but her father kept pushing them together. "Daddy, I don't need—" "You need to focus on what's important." Leo's voice grew stern. "This family has a reputation to maintain. The right marriage, the right connections. That's how we survive." Elena bit back her response. At 29, she felt more like a chess piece than a daughter. Her interior design business was successful, but Leo still treated her like a child who needed guidance. Or control. A knock on her office door saved her from having to answer. Preston Walsh stepped inside, his blonde hair slicked back, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. "Elena, darling." He crossed the room and kissed her cheek, his cologne too strong. "You look stunning. Are you ready for tonight's adventure?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she said, forcing a smile. Preston chatted easily with her father about business and golf while Elena gathered her purse. She caught her reflection in the mirror by the door. Elegant dress, perfect makeup, styled hair. She looked like the daughter Leo wanted. But inside, she felt hollow. 20 minutes later, she sat in Preston's Mercedes as they drove through Port Haven's winding streets. The town was divided into 2 worlds. The hill, where Elena had grown up, with its grand old houses and manicured gardens. And down by the water, the ironworks district, where working families lived in smaller homes with tiny yards and big dreams. The car passed through the ironworks district on the way to the harbor. Elena pressed her face to the window, watching the changes. New restaurants had opened, art galleries, coffee shops with outdoor seating. Young families pushed strollers down sidewalks that used to be empty after dark. Amazing how they've cleaned up this area, Preston said, not bothering to hide his surprise. I remember when you wouldn't drive through here at night. Elena remembered too, but not for the same reasons. 7 years ago, she'd driven through this neighborhood every chance she could. There had been a boy who worked at Thompson's auto shop on Harbor Street, a boy with gentle hands and a smile that made her forget she was Leo Vance's daughter. But that was a long time ago. The old cannery sat right on the water, its red brick walls glowing in the evening light. Elena's breath caught as their car joined the line of expensive vehicles dropping off Port Haven's elite. The building looked completely different. What had once been a rundown fish processing plant was now elegant and modern, with large glass doors and warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk. Impressive renovation, Preston said as he helped her from the car. I heard they spent over $2 million on the restoration. Elena nodded, but her attention was caught by the sign above the entrance. Thorn Gallery and Studios. The name hit her like a physical blow. It couldn't be. Thorn was a common enough name. It didn't mean anything. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. The old machinery was gone, replaced by soaring ceilings, polished concrete floors, and stunning metal sculptures that seemed to dance in the carefully placed lighting. Port Haven's wealthy and influential mingled with champagne glasses, their voices creating a gentle hum of conversation. Elena! Preston! Her father appeared at her side, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Have you seen the owner yet? I need to introduce myself, discuss the club situation. Not yet, Daddy. We just arrived. The crowd was a mix of old Port Haven families and newer residents. Elena recognized most faces, but there were some she didn't know. Younger people, artists maybe, who looked more comfortable in jeans than formal wear. A small stage had been set up at the far end of the space. Elena found herself drawn toward it, though she couldn't explain why. Her heels clicked on the polished floor as she moved through the crowd, Preston and her father following close behind. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice called from the stage. The room grew quiet. Welcome to Thorn Gallery. The lights dimmed slightly, focusing attention on the stage. Elena's heart began to race for no reason she could name. A figure stepped into the light, and her world tilted on its axis. Marcus Thorne stood on the stage like he owned not just the building, but the entire town. Gone was the 23-year-old boy she'd known. This man was 6'3" of solid muscle, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit with work boots that somehow made the formal wear look even more powerful. His dark skin seemed to glow under the lights, and when he smiled, Elena felt 7 years of carefully built walls crumble around her. This building has a history, Marcus said, his voice carrying easily through the space. It was a place where working people earned honest livings, where families built their futures. I wanted to honor that while creating something new. Elena couldn't breathe. She felt Preston's hand on her arm, heard her father's sharp intake of breath as he recognized the name. But everything felt far away and muffled. Art should be accessible, Marcus continued. So should opportunity. This gallery will showcase local artists alongside established ones. The studios upstairs will provide affordable workspace for creators who might not otherwise have a chance to pursue their dreams. The crowd murmured approval. This wasn't what they'd expected from a mysterious investor. This was someone with a vision that went beyond profit. I have one more announcement, Marcus said, his smile growing wider. I want to introduce someone very special. My daughter, Ruby. A little girl bounded onto the stage, all energy and joy. She wore a purple dress with paint stains on the hem, her hair in 2 puffy ponytails decorated with colorful ribbons. She couldn't be more than 7 years old, and she moved with complete confidence as she took the microphone from Marcus. Hi, everyone, she said, her voice bright and clear. I'm Ruby Thorne, and I help my daddy make art. This is going to be the best gallery ever. The crowd laughed and applauded. Ruby beamed, clearly comfortable with attention. She had Marcus's confident bearing but softer features. Elena studied the child's face, feeling something cold and desperate growing in her chest. The girl had her smile. Elena's champagne glass slipped from nerveless fingers. The sound of crystal shattering on concrete echoed through the sudden silence like a gunshot. Every face in the room turned toward her, but Elena only saw Marcus. His eyes found hers across the crowded space. For a moment, 7 years collapsed into nothing. She was 22 again, young and hopeful and desperately in love. He was 23, working 2 jobs to save money, talking about their future like it was a sure thing. But then his expression hardened, his jaw tightened. The warmth left his eyes, replaced by something cold and unforgiving. "I'm so sorry," Elena heard herself saying, as people around her stepped back from the broken glass. "I'm sorry, excuse me, I need—" She pushed through the crowd, ignoring Preston calling her name, ignoring her father's angry whisper. She had to get out, had to breathe, had to think. The cool night air hit her face as she stumbled out of the gallery. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her car keys, her designer heels clicking frantically on the sidewalk. Ruby. The little girl was 7 years old. Elena did the math in her head, even though she didn't want to. 7 years ago, she'd been pregnant. 7 years ago, her father had made her choose between her unborn child and the man she loved. 7 years ago, she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Elena drove through the dark streets without really seeing them, muscle memory guiding her to a small beach on the outskirts of town. This had been their place, hers and Marcus's, where they'd come to talk about their dreams, plan their future, fall deeper in love with every shared sunset. She parked on the sand and stepped out of the car, not caring that her expensive heels sank into the soft ground. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, moonlight dancing on the waves. And then the tears came. 7 years of holding it together, 7 years of pretending her heart wasn't broken, 7 years of living the life her father chose for her. It all came pouring out as she collapsed onto the sand, her gala dress spread around her like a broken promise. The memory hit her with brutal clarity. She'd been 2 months pregnant, glowing with happiness and secret plans. Marcus had just proposed, offering her a simple ring he'd saved months to buy. They were going to elope, start fresh somewhere new, build a life together. Then her father found out. Leo had been calm, cold, methodical. He'd presented her with a police file, photos, documents that painted Marcus as a criminal. Grand larceny, stolen car parts. A case the police had been building for months. "He's been using you," Leo had said. "Getting close to our family to get information, access. The prosecutor will put him away for 20 years. Unless she signed away custody of her unborn child. Unless she left town immediately. Unless she never contacted Marcus again." "He won't even know there was a baby," Leo had promised. "I'll make sure the case disappears. He'll be free to build whatever life he wants, but without you." Elena had been young, scared, and completely unprepared for her father's manipulation. She'd believed the lies about Marcus being a criminal. She'd thought she was saving him by walking away. Now, sitting on the beach where they'd planned their future, she realized the truth. Marcus wasn't a criminal. He'd never used her. And somewhere in those 7 years, he'd become successful beyond anything either of them had imagined. He'd also raised their daughter alone. Ruby had his confidence, his warmth, his easy way with people. But she had Elena's smile, Elena's eyes, Elena's artistic spirit. She was the child Elena had given up to protect a man who hadn't needed protecting. And now he was back in Port Haven, powerful and wealthy, and looking at Elena like she was the enemy, because from his perspective, she was. She disappeared without explanation, abandoning him and their child for no reason he could understand. He thought she'd chosen her family's money over their love. Elena pulled her knees to her chest, ruining her dress completely. The ocean waves crashed against the shore, steady and relentless. Somewhere in town, Marcus was probably putting Ruby to bed in their new home. Their daughter was probably asking questions about the lady who broke the glass at Daddy's gallery opening, and Elena had no right to any of it. She'd lost them both 7 years ago. Tonight, she'd learn exactly what that loss looked like. The worst part was the hope that had flared in her chest when she saw Ruby on that stage. For one impossible moment, she'd imagined what it might be like to be part of their lives again. To watch Ruby grow up, to see Marcus smile at her the way he used to, to build the family they dreamed of. But Marcus's cold stare had killed that hope before it could fully form. He'd looked at her like she was a stranger, or worse, like she was the woman who'd broken his heart and abandoned his child. Which, she supposed, was exactly what she was. Elena sat on the beach until her tears ran dry and the moon set over the horizon. Tomorrow, she'd have to face the consequences of tonight. Her father would demand explanations. Preston would want to know why she'd embarrassed him. The whole town would be talking about her dramatic exit from the gallery opening. But tonight, she just grieved for everything she'd lost and everything she'd never had the chance to find. The girl with the paint-stained dress and bright smile was her daughter. The man in the expensive suit with work boots was the love of her life, and Elena was the woman who'd walked away from them both. Elena woke up on her living room sofa, still wearing her ruined gala dress. Sunlight streamed through the windows of her apartment and her phone buzzed constantly on the coffee table. 17 missed calls from her father, 12 from Preston, 6 text messages demanding to know where she was and what had happened. She ignored them all. Her reflection in the hallway mirror looked like something from a disaster movie. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her carefully styled hair hung in tangles, and sand clung to the expensive fabric of her dress. But for the first time in years, she didn't care what she looked like. She had to see Marcus. After a quick shower and change into jeans and a simple blue sweater, Elena drove back toward the harbor. The Ironworks district looked different in daylight, vibrant and busy with people heading to work, kids walking to school, life happening in all its messy glory. The old cannery buzzed with activity. Construction trucks filled the parking lot and workers carried materials through the loading dock. Elena parked across the street and sat in her car for 10 minutes, trying to gather courage. She wasn't sure she had. Finally, she walked across the street and through the main entrance. The gallery space was empty now, except for a few workers installing track lighting. She could hear the sound of metal on metal coming from somewhere deeper in the building. Following the sound, Elena found herself in what used to be the main processing floor. Marcus stood with his back to her, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, a welding mask covering his face as he worked on a massive steel sculpture. Sparks flew from his torch, creating patterns of light against the brick walls. Elena waited and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Marcus had to know she was there. Her footsteps had echoed on the concrete floor, but he didn't acknowledge her presence. Finally, he shut off the torch and pulled off his mask. When he turned around, his expression was cold enough to freeze the harbor. "What do you want, Elena?" His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher. 7 years of success hadn't softened the edges that poverty and struggle had carved into him. If anything, he seemed harder now, more guarded. "I want to explain." "No." He turned back to his sculpture, picking up a piece of sandpaper to smooth a rough edge. "I'm not interested in explanations. Not from you." "Marcus, please, if you'll just listen." "I listened for 6 months." His hands never stopped moving, but she heard the anger underneath his calm tone. "I listened for the sound of your car in my driveway, for your key in my door, for your voice telling me you were coming back." Elena's throat burned. "I wanted to come back. You have to believe me." "Do I?" He finally looked at her again, and the pain in his dead eyes made her step backward. "Because all I know is that one day you were there, talking about our future and our baby, and the next day you were gone. No note, no phone call, nothing." Your father didn't make you choose." Marcus's voice rose slightly. "You chose. You picked their money over me, over us." "That's not what happened." "Then what did happen, Elena?" He dropped the sandpaper and faced her fully. "Tell me. Make me understand how someone just disappears from the life of someone they claim to love." Elena opened her mouth, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain 7 years of regret in a few sentences? How could she make him understand that she thought she was saving him? "I was young," she started. "I was scared." "So was I." Marcus's laugh held no humor. I was 23 years old, working 2 jobs, trying to figure out how to support a family, but I didn't run. I didn't run either. I was forced. Nobody forced you to do anything. He wiped his hands on a rag, leaving streaks of metal dust. You made a choice, and you know what? I respect that choice. I built a life around it. Elena looked around the space, at the expensive equipment, the professional setup, the clear signs of success. You've done well for yourself. Better than you thought I would? There was challenge in his voice now. Better than some mechanic from the wrong side of town deserved? I never thought that. You know I never cared about any of that. Right. That's why you're here now. Because you never cared about money or status. Marcus moved closer, and Elena caught a hint of his cologne mixed with the smell of metal and work. Let me guess. Your daddy sent you to keep an eye on the enemy. Make sure the poor kid doesn't get too big for his boots. Elena's temper flared. You think I'm here to spy on you? I think you're here because I have something your family wants. His smile was cold. See, Elena, I didn't just buy this building. I bought the banknote on your father's country club. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. What? Vance Country Club owes $2 million to Harbor National Bank. Harbor National Bank sold that debt to me last month. Marcus stepped closer. I own your family's legacy now. Everything your father built, everything he's so proud of, it all belongs to me. Elena's legs felt weak. Marcus, you can't. Can't what? Take what's legally mine? He shrugged. Your father always said I wasn't good enough for his daughter. Turns out I'm good enough to own his business. Please, Elena whispered, don't destroy my family because of what I did. What you did? Marcus laughed, but it sounded broken. Elena, I didn't come back here for revenge. I came back because this is where my daughter was conceived. This is where I fell in love for the first and only time in my life. I came back to build something beautiful in a place that used to mean everything to me. Then why buy the debt? Because your father made sure I could never forget where I came from. Even after I left Port Haven, even after I became successful, his lawyer kept tabs on me, kept making sure I knew I wasn't welcome back in this town. Elena stared at him. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know. Marcus picked up his welding mask. But here's what you need to know now. I need a local interior designer to finish the living spaces upstairs. Ruby needs a home, and I need it done fast. You want me to work for you? I want you to work for me, take orders from me, do exactly what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it. His eyes held hers. If you do a perfect job, I'll extend your father's loan. Give him time to get back on his feet. Elena felt trapped, but also strangely hopeful. Working for Marcus meant spending time near Ruby. It meant a chance to prove herself, to show him she wasn't the person he thought she was. And if I mess up? Then your family loses everything. Marcus pulled the welding mask down over his face. Don't be late tomorrow, Ms. Vance. 7 a.m. sharp. That evening, Elena sat across from her father and Preston at the formal dining room table in the Vance family estate. The house felt like a museum, perfect, cold, and utterly lifeless. Explain to me, Leo said, cutting his steak with precise movements. Why you embarrassed our family last night. I wasn't feeling well. I needed air. You needed air. Leo's tone suggested he didn't believe her. And this morning? Where were you this morning when I needed to discuss damage control? Elena took a sip of wine, buying time. I went to see the gallery owner. Preston looked up from his plate. That was smart. Keep your enemies close, right? He's not my enemy. Then what is he? Leo's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Because someone with that much money buying property in our town? Someone we don't know, with connections we can't trace. That's dangerous, Elena. If only he knew how well she used to know Marcus Thorne. I secured a contract, Elena said carefully. He needs interior design work done on his living spaces. I'll be overseeing the project. Leo smiled for the first time all evening. Excellent. That puts you in perfect position to gather information. Find out his weaknesses, his plans for the property. Daddy, I'm not going to spy. You're going to do whatever is necessary to protect this family. Leo's voice turned sharp. The Vance name means something in this town. I won't let some outsider destroy what 3 generations built. Elena looked around the dining room with its expensive wallpaper and crystal chandelier. Everything in this house was designed to impress, to show wealth and status. But she couldn't remember ever feeling happy here. What if he's not trying to destroy anything? She asked quietly. What if he just wants to build something new? Preston laughed. People like that don't build, Elena. They take. They see something established, something with history, and they tear it down to make themselves feel important. People like that. Elena wondered what Preston would say if he knew she'd once loved someone like that, if he knew she'd planned to spend her life with someone like that. I should go, Elena said, standing up. Early morning tomorrow. Elena. Leo's voice stopped her at the dining room door. Remember who you are. Remember what you owe this family. Elena drove home, thinking about debt and loyalty and the weight of family expectations. She thought about Marcus's cold anger and Ruby's bright smile. She thought about 7 years of choices that couldn't be undone, but mostly she thought about tomorrow morning and the chance to see her daughter again. Back in her apartment, Elena pulled out a photo album she kept hidden in her bedroom closet. On the first page was a picture of her and Marcus at the beach, both of them tan and laughing, his arms wrapped around her from behind. They looked impossibly young and completely in love. She traced his face with her finger. I'm coming back, she whispered to the photograph. I know you don't want me to, but I'm coming back anyway. The next morning, Elena stopped at Sarah's Sweets on her way to the gallery. She needed coffee, but more than that, she needed to see Marcus's aunt. Sarah had practically raised Marcus after his parents died in a car accident when he was 15. She'd been the closest thing to a mother-in-law Elena had ever had. The bakery smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. Sarah Thorne stood behind the counter, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her dark skin lined with years of laughter. At 65, she moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been feeding people her whole life. When she saw Elena, Sarah's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Well, she said quietly, look what the tide washed up. Elena approached the counter carefully. Hello, Miss Sarah. Miss Sarah? Sarah shook her head. 7 years ago, you called me Aunt Sarah. 7 years ago, you sat in that corner booth planning your wedding, talking about the grandbaby you were carrying. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I know I hurt him. I hurt everyone. You broke that boy's heart. Sarah poured coffee into a large cup, her movements sharp with old anger. He went half crazy looking for you, drove to every hospital between here and Charleston, thinking something terrible had happened. Something terrible did happen. Sarah's eyes sharpened. What's that supposed to mean? Elena wanted to tell her everything, about her father's threats, about the police file, about the impossible choice she'd been forced to make. But the words stuck in her throat. I was young, she said instead. I made mistakes. We all make mistakes, child, but we don't all run away from them. Sarah slid the coffee across the counter. That man raised your daughter alone. Do you understand what that means? He learned to braid hair and paint fingernails and answer questions about why little girls don't have their mamas. Elena gripped the coffee cup so tight her knuckles turned white. How is she? Sarah's expression softened slightly. Ruby's a gift from God. Smart as a whip, artistic like both her parents, and stubborn enough to survive anything. She's the light of Marcus's life. Does she know about me? She knows her mama went away when she was a baby. Marcus told her you weren't ready to be a family, but that it wasn't her fault. Sarah leaned closer. That child has spent 7 years wondering if her mama might come back someday. Elena's heart broke a little more. And Marcus? Marcus built a wall around his heart, iron and steel, just like his sculptures. Don't break that wall unless you plan to stay, Elena. Don't you dare break it again. Elena paid for her coffee and walked toward the door. but Sarah's voice stopped her. Elena. When she turned back, Sarah's expression was gentler. I see pain in your eyes. Real pain. I don't know what happened 7 years ago, but I know you. I know the girl who used to sit in that booth planning her future with my nephew. That girl made terrible choices. Maybe. Or maybe terrible things happened to that girl. Sarah wiped down the counter with practiced motions. Either way, she's gone now. The question is, who are you today? Elena left the bakery with Sarah's words echoing in her mind. Who was she today? She'd spent 7 years being Leo Vance's obedient daughter, living the life he chose for her. But walking toward the old cannery, toward Marcus and Ruby, she felt like someone different. Someone who might be brave enough to fight for what she wanted. The gallery bustled with activity. Workers installed sound equipment while others adjusted lighting. Elena found Marcus on the second floor, standing in what would become the main living space. The area was completely unfinished, exposed brick walls, concrete floors, and industrial windows that flooded the space with light. He wore jeans and work boots again, but today his t-shirt was black, making his dark skin seem to glow in the morning light. He studied architectural plans spread across a makeshift table made from sawhorses and plywood. You're on time, he said without looking up. That's something. Elena set her coffee down and moved closer to the plans. Show me what you're thinking. For the next hour, they discussed the renovation. Marcus wanted open-concept living, but warm and comfortable, not the sterile perfection Elena had grown up with. He wanted Ruby to feel at home, to have space for her art projects and room to play. Everything he suggested was the opposite of what Elena would normally design for wealthy clients. No formal dining room, no separate sitting areas, no spaces designed purely for show. Too bougie, he said when she suggested marble countertops. Too stiff. Clients usually prefer. I'm not your usual client. Marcus rolled up the plans. I want a home, not a showpiece. Can you design that, or do I need to find someone else? Elena felt something spark inside her, frustration mixed with inspiration. She grabbed a napkin from the coffee shop and started sketching rapidly. Open kitchen with a large island where Ruby could do homework while Marcus cooked, living room with built-in bookshelves and window seats for reading, art studio space with good light and storage for supplies. She drew quickly, not thinking about what rich clients wanted or what her father would approve of. She drew a home where a family could actually live. When she finished, she slid the napkin across the table. Marcus studied it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Build that, he said finally, and walked away, leaving Elena breathless with something that felt almost like hope. 2 weeks later, the renovation was in full swing. Elena found herself at the gallery every day, coordinating contractors and suppliers, making 100 small decisions that would turn empty space into a home. Marcus traveled frequently for business, leaving Elena to work with Ruby's nanny, Mrs. Rodriguez. But on the days when he was home, Elena felt the tension between them like electricity in the air. They were careful with each other, professional. But sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. And sometimes, when they disagreed about a design choice, she saw flashes of the passionate young man who used to argue with her about everything from movies to politics to the best way to make coffee. On a Thursday afternoon in late October, Elena was supervising the installation of custom bookshelves when she heard voices in the hallway. Ruby's laughter bubbled through the space like music. Mrs. Rodriguez, can I see the pretty lady again? Ruby's voice carried clearly through the open doorway. Elena's heart jumped. She hadn't seen Ruby since the gallery opening, though she'd heard her daughter's voice echoing through the building when she came home from school. Your papa said you should do your homework first, Mrs. Rodriguez replied in accented English. But I want to show her my new drawing. It's really good. Elena found herself moving toward the sound of Ruby's voice before she could stop herself. In the hallway, she found a little girl with paint-stained fingers and a huge smile, clutching a piece of paper covered in bright colors. Hi, Ruby said, apparently delighted to see her. You're the lady who broke the glass. I remember you. Elena's throat went tight. Hello, Ruby. I remember you too.
Look what I made.
Ruby held up her drawing.
It's our new house. See? That's my room, and that's Daddy's room, and that's the kitchen where we're going to eat pancakes every morning.
Elena knelt down to Ruby's level, studying the drawing. The little girl had talent, real talent. Her use of color was sophisticated for her age, and the way she'd drawn the spaces showed an understanding of perspective that impressed Elena. This is beautiful work, Ruby. You're a real artist. Ruby beamed. Daddy says I get it from him, but I think maybe I get it from somewhere else too. Mrs. Rodriguez says sometimes kids look like people they've never met. Elena glanced at Mrs. Rodriguez, who was watching the interaction with sharp, knowing eyes. How much did the nanny know about Ruby's parentage? Can you teach me something? Ruby asked suddenly. About drawing, I mean. Daddy knows about metal and making big sculptures, but he doesn't know about drawing people. Elena looked at the hope in her daughter's eyes and felt her carefully built defenses crumble. I could show you some shading techniques. Ruby plopped down on the floor right there in the hallway, patting the space beside her. Show me now! For the next 20 minutes, Elena sat on the concrete floor teaching her daughter how to use pencil pressure to create depth and shadow. Ruby was a quick learner, asking thoughtful questions and implementing suggestions immediately. You're really good at this, Ruby said, studying Elena's example sketch. Are you going to live here too? No, sweetheart. I'm just helping make your house pretty. But you could live here. There's lots of room. And Daddy gets lonely sometimes, even though he pretends he doesn't. Elena's heart squeezed. Your daddy has you. That's all he needs. Maybe, but sometimes I hear him talking to my picture, telling it he's sorry I don't have a mama. Ruby's expression grew serious. Do you think my mama misses me? Elena couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. She wanted to pull Ruby into her arms, tell her the truth, explain everything. Instead, she reached out and tucked a curl behind Ruby's ear. I think your mama loves you very much, she managed, even if she can't be here with you. Ruby! Marcus's voice cut through the moment like a knife. He stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. What are you doing? Ruby jumped up, clutching her drawing.
Daddy, the pretty lady was teaching me about shading. Look what I learned.
Marcus barely glanced at the paper. His eyes were locked on Elena, who was still kneeling on the floor. Mrs. Rodriguez, please take Ruby upstairs for her snack.
But Daddy...
Now, Ruby. After they left, Marcus and Elena faced each other in the empty hallway. The air between them crackled with tension. I told you to stay away from my daughter. Elena stood up slowly, brushing dust from her jeans. She came to me. I wasn't going to ignore a child. You don't get to parent her. Marcus moved closer, his voice low and dangerous. You don't get to teach her things or comfort her or act like you care about her future. But I do care. No, he cut her off. You gave up the right to care 7 years ago. Ruby is my daughter, mine. You're here to do a job, nothing more. Elena felt her own temper rising. She's lonely, Marcus. She needs stability. She needs consistency. She needs people who won't disappear from her life without explanation. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. She doesn't need you. Elena stared at him, seeing past his anger to the fear underneath. He was terrified she'd hurt Ruby the way she'd hurt him. You're right, she said quietly. I'll keep my distance. But as she walked away, Elena heard Ruby's voice echoing in her memory. Do you think my mama misses me? More than you'll ever know, she thought. More than you'll ever know. 2 days after Marcus's warning, Elena kept her distance from Ruby, but the little girl made it impossible to ignore her completely. Ruby had a way of appearing wherever Elena was working, always with Mrs. Rodriguez close behind, always with a new drawing or a question about colors. Elena tried to be polite but distant, professional. But Ruby's bright chatter and infectious laugh made it nearly impossible to stay cold. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Elena was reviewing paint samples in what would become the living room, when her father appeared in the doorway. Leo Vance looked out of place in the construction zone, his expensive suit and polished shoes a sharp contrast to the unfinished space. "Elena, we need to talk." She set down the color swatches. "Daddy, what are you doing here?" "Checking on my investment." Leo moved into the room, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. "This Thorne character has been making waves in town. Buying property, making connections. I need to know what he's planning." "He's building a home for his daughter, that's all I know." "That's all." Leo's voice carried disappointment. "Elena, you've been working here for 2 weeks. Surely you've learned something useful." Elena thought about Ruby's drawings scattered across Marcus's makeshift desk, about the way he'd insisted on a reading nook by the big window, about how he'd asked 3 times if the art studio would have enough light for a 7-year-old to paint in. "He loves his daughter," she said. "Finally. Everything he's doing is for her." "Everyone loves their children, Elena. That doesn't tell me about his business plans." Leo moved to the window overlooking the harbor. "Preston has been doing some research. Did you know your Mr. Thorne has connections with several major development companies?" Elena's stomach dropped. "What kind of connections?" "The kind that tear down old buildings and put up shopping centers. The kind that turn historic neighborhoods into tourist traps." Leo turned back to her. "I think your friend is planning to destroy the character of this town, one property at a time." "You don't know that." "I know enough." Leo's expression hardened. "And I know you're not getting me the information I need. Perhaps it's time for a more direct approach." That afternoon, Elena was coordinating the installation of kitchen cabinets when Preston arrived with a manila folder tucked under his arm. He looked pleased with himself in a way that made Elena nervous. "Elena." "Darling, how's the spy mission going?" "It's not a spy mission. I'm doing interior design work." "Right," Preston smiled. "Well, I've brought something that might help speed things along." He opened the folder and spread several photographs across the cabinet installer's workbench. Elena's blood ran cold as she recognized Marcus in the images, but not the Marcus she knew. These photos showed a younger man with rage in his eyes, being arrested outside a bar. "What is this?" "Your boyfriend's criminal record," Preston said smugly. "Turns out Marcus Thorne has a history of violence. Bar fights, assault charges, all dismissed, but still." Elena studied the photos. In one, Marcus's face was bruised and swollen. In another, his hands were cuffed behind his back. But his eyes, even in the harsh light of police cameras, his eyes looked broken rather than dangerous. "When were these taken?" "About 7 years ago, right around the time he left Port Haven, actually." Preston gathered the photos. "Interesting timing, don't you think?" Elena's heart pounded. 7 years ago, right after she'd disappeared from his life. "What are you planning to do with these?" "Share them with the local media. Let the town know what kind of man is buying up their neighborhood." Preston's smile was cold. "Unless, of course, you can find something more useful. Something that would convince him to leave quietly." "Preston, you can't." "I can't what? Protect our community from a violent criminal with suspicious business connections?" Preston moved closer. "Elena, this man is a threat. To the town, to your family, to you. I'm trying to help." "By destroying him?" "By stopping him before he destroys us." Preston tucked the folder under his arm. "You have 24 hours to find something we can use. Otherwise, these photos go public." That evening, Elena sat in her car outside the gallery, staring at the warm light spilling from the upstairs windows. She could see shadows moving behind. The glass. Marcus and Ruby sharing dinner, probably talking about their days. The photos Preston had shown her kept flashing through her mind. Marcus being arrested, his face full of pain and rage. She tried to imagine what could have driven the gentle man she'd known to violence. Then she remembered the timeline. 7 years ago, right after she'd disappeared, right when he would have been searching for her, desperate for answers, half crazy with worry and heartbreak. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Any progress? Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. She had to warn Marcus. Elena climbed the stairs to the living quarters, her heart pounding with each step. She found Marcus in the kitchen, washing dishes while Ruby sat at the island working on homework.
Elena!
Ruby bounced in her chair.
Look, I used the shading thing you showed me.
She held up a math worksheet where she'd drawn elaborate flowers in the margins, each one carefully shaded to show depth and dimension. Ruby, that's beautiful, but maybe save the art for after homework? Marcus's voice was gentle with his daughter, though his expression remained cold when he looked at Elena. I need to talk to you, Elena said quietly. It's important. Marcus glanced at Ruby, who was already back to her math problems. Ruby, why don't you finish this in your room? I'll check it in a few minutes. After Ruby gathered her things and disappeared down the hall, Marcus turned to Elena with crossed arms. What's so important it couldn't wait until tomorrow? Elena pulled out her phone and showed him the photo Preston had shared with her. Marcus being arrested, his face bruised and furious. Marcus went very still. Where did you get this? Preston Walsh. He has more. He's planning to release them to the media tomorrow unless... Unless what? Elena's throat felt tight. Unless I find something they can use to force you to leave town. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course he is. He moved to the window, staring out at the dark harbor. Do you know what happened that night? Elena shook her head, though he wasn't looking at her. I've been searching for you for 3 days. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. I kept thinking something terrible had happened. His voice was quiet, controlled. I went to every hospital, every police station. Finally, I ended up at Mickey's bar, trying to drink enough to stop thinking about all the things that might have happened to you. Elena's heart broke a little more. Some guy at the bar recognized me, started talking about how you'd finally come to your senses, how you'd figured out you were too good for trash like me. Marcus's hands gripped the windowsill. I lost it, completely lost it, put him through a table. Marcus. The charges were dropped. The guy admitted he'd been trying to start a fight, but the arrest went on my record anyway. He turned to face her. That's what your friend found. The evidence of the worst night of my life. Elena felt tears burning her eyes. I'm so sorry. Why are you telling me this? Why warn me? Marcus studied her face. Your father sent you here to spy on me. Your boyfriend wants me gone. Why betray them for me? Because I never wanted to hurt you. Not then, not now. But you did hurt me. Marcus moved closer. You destroyed me, Elena. Do you understand that? You were my whole world, and you just vanished. I know I did, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix 7 years. Marcus's voice cracked. Sorry doesn't explain why Ruby asks me almost every day if her mama might come home. Elena's tears spilled over. She talks about me? She talks about the idea of you, the fantasy of a mother who might love her someday. Marcus wiped his eyes roughly. I've spent 7 years trying to be enough for her, trying to fill the hole you left. You are enough. Anyone can see how much she loves you. But she still wants her mother. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. And I can't give her that, can I? Because her mother chose to leave. Elena wanted to tell him everything, about her father's threats, about the fake police file, about the impossible choice she'd been forced to make, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she reached out and touched his arm. I'm telling you about the photos because I don't want to see you hurt anymore. Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm. For a moment, the hostility left his face, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. Thank you, he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, full of 7 years of longing and regret. Then Marcus stepped back, breaking the contact. You should go. Ruby will be coming back soon. Elena nodded and headed for the stairs, but at the doorway, she turned back. Marcus, that night at the bar, what you did, it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. She was halfway down the stairs when she heard Ruby's voice from the hallway above.
Daddy, why was Elena crying?
Elena didn't wait to hear Marcus's answer. The next morning, Elena arrived at the gallery to find Marcus loading equipment into his truck. Ruby sat on the front steps, her small suitcase beside her, looking confused and sad. What's happening? Elena asked. We're leaving. Marcus didn't look at her as he secured a sculpture in the truck bed. Taking a trip to visit some clients in Atlanta, maybe Charleston after that. Elena's heart sank. You're running because of the photos? I'm protecting my daughter from a media circus. Marcus slammed the tailgate shut. Ruby doesn't need to see her father's picture in the newspaper with the word criminal attached to it. But this is your home now. You can't let them drive you away. Watch me. Ruby stood up from the steps, her lower lip trembling. Daddy, I don't want to go. I like it here. I made friends at school, and Mrs. Rodriguez was going to teach me to make empanadas. Marcus knelt down to Ruby's level. I know, baby girl, but sometimes we have to leave places, even when we don't want to. Is it because of the mean people Elena told you about? Marcus's eyes shot to Elena. What did she tell you? She said some people were trying to hurt you with lies. Ruby's voice was small. But lies can't really hurt you, can they? They're just words. Marcus looked torn between anger and heartbreak. Sometimes words can hurt worse than anything else, Ruby. Then why don't we fight back? Ruby's voice grew stronger. You always tell me to stand up to bullies. It's more complicated than that. No, it's not. Ruby crossed her arms, looking remarkably like her father when he was determined. If people are lying about you, then we tell the truth. That's what you taught me. Elena watched this exchange with growing desperation. She couldn't let Marcus run away again. She couldn't let Ruby lose her home because of her father's manipulations. Ruby's. Right, Elena said suddenly. We should tell the truth. Marcus stood up slowly. Elena, this isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Elena's voice grew stronger. It's exactly my fight, and I'm done running from it. She pulled out her phone and dialed Preston's number, putting it on speaker so Marcus could hear. Elena, darling, Preston's voice came through clearly. Have you convinced your friend to see reason? I have a better idea, Elena said, her voice steady. Why don't you publish those photos? All of them. Silence on the other end of the line. Elena, what are you doing? Marcus whispered. I'm calling his bluff. Elena kept her eyes on Marcus as she spoke into the phone. See, Preston, I did some research of my own. Those photos show Marcus being arrested for defending himself against a man who was harassing him about his missing girlfriend. A girlfriend who disappeared without explanation, leaving him devastated and desperate. Elena, Preston's voice carried a warning. The question people will ask when they see those photos isn't, what kind of criminal is Marcus Thorne? The question will be, what happened to the girlfriend? Where did she go? And why? Elena could hear Preston breathing heavily on the other end of the line. And if they dig into that story, Elena continued, they might find some very interesting information about the Vance family and their methods of dealing with people they consider unsuitable. You're bluffing, Preston said, but he sounded uncertain. Try me. Elena ended the call and looked at Marcus. He won't publish those photos. How can you be sure? Because the last thing my father wants is people asking questions about what happened 7 years ago. Elena's hand shook, but her voice remained steady. Some stones are better left unturned. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. What happened 7 years ago, Elena? Before Elena could answer, Ruby tugged on her father's shirt. Does this mean we can stay? Marcus looked down at his daughter. then back at Elena. We're staying, baby girl, but we need to have a serious conversation about truth and lies and the things grown-ups do to each other. Ruby nodded solemnly. Can Elena help with that conversation? She's really good at explaining things. Marcus's expression was unreadable. Maybe. We'll see. As Ruby ran inside to unpack her suitcase, Marcus and Elena stood alone in the morning light. Thank you, he said quietly, for standing up for us. I should have done it 7 years ago. Elena. I need to tell you something. Elena took a deep breath. Tonight, after Ruby's in bed, I need to tell you the truth about why I left. Marcus studied her face, searching for something. Will I want to hear it? No, Elena said honestly, but you need to hear it anyway. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment, staring at a box she'd pulled from the back of her closet. Inside were letters she'd written to Marcus over the years but never sent, photos of the ultrasound he'd never seen, a copy of the custody papers her father had forced her to sign, evidence of 7 years of loving him from a distance. Her phone rang. Marcus. Ruby's asleep, he said without preamble. Come over. Elena's hand shook as she gathered the contents of the box. It was time to tell him everything. Time to give him the truth he deserved. Time to face the consequences of the choice that had shaped both their lives. As she drove toward the gallery, toward Marcus and the conversation that would change everything, Elena whispered a prayer to whatever forces might be listening. Please let him understand. Please let him forgive me. Please let it not be too late. The harbor lights twinkled in her rearview mirror like fallen stars, and Elena drove toward her reckoning with the past. Elena climbed the stairs to Marcus's apartment with the box clutched against her chest like armor. Each step felt heavier than the last. Through the windows, she could see him waiting in the kitchen, 2 cups of coffee growing cold on the counter. When she knocked, he opened the door immediately, as if he'd been standing there listening for her footsteps. Come in, he said quietly. The living room looked different in the evening light, warmer. Ruby's artwork covered the refrigerator, and her stuffed animals were scattered across the couch where she'd been reading before bed. It looked like a real home, the kind of home Elena had dreamed about when she was 22 and pregnant and planning a future she'd never get to have. Marcus gestured toward the couch. Sit, please. Elena perched on the edge of the cushions, the box balanced on her knees. Marcus sat across from her in an armchair, close enough to touch, but far enough away that she felt the distance like a physical ache. I brought some things, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Things that might help you understand. She opened the box and pulled out a manila folder. Her hands shook as she held it toward him. What is this? A police file, or what I thought was a police file 7 years ago. Elena's throat felt raw. My father showed it to me the day after you proposed, the day I found out I was pregnant. Marcus took the folder with careful hands as if it might explode. Inside were photographs of stolen car parts, police reports, witness statements, all with his name on them. All fake, Elena realized now. But 7 years ago, they'd looked real enough to terrify a scared 22-year-old girl. Grand larceny, Marcus read aloud. 20 years in state prison. He looked up at Elena, his face pale. I've never seen this before in my life. Because it's fake, all of it. Elena's tears started flowing before she could stop them. But I didn't know that then. I was young and scared, and I believed him when he said you were using me to get information about our family's business connections. Marcus stared at the fake police reports. You thought I was a criminal. For about 5 minutes. Then I remembered who you were, how you'd never even taken a pen from the auto shop without permission. I knew it had to be wrong. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. So I told my father I didn't believe it. And he said it didn't matter whether it was true or not. He'd already given copies to the district attorney. You were going to be arrested within the week, unless... Elena's voice broke completely. Marcus set the folder aside and leaned forward. Unless what, Elena? Unless I signed away custody of our baby and disappeared from your life forever. Elena pulled out another document, official-looking papers with her signature at the bottom. He said if I walked away, the case would disappear. You'd never even know you'd been in danger. Marcus took the custody papers with hands that trembled slightly. You gave up our child to save me from prison. I gave up everything to save you. Elena's voice was barely a whisper, and I've regretted it every day since. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 7 years of pain and misunderstanding. Marcus read through the custody papers line by line, his expression growing darker with each paragraph. You signed these under duress, he said finally. No court would have upheld them if you challenged them. I was 22 years old and terrified. I didn't know that. Elena pulled out a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. I wrote to you, every week for the first year, then every month, then just on birthdays and holidays. I never sent them, but I wrote them. Marcus untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. Elena watched his face as he read her words from 7 years ago. Her apologies, her explanations, her desperate love for a man she thought she'd never see again. Dear Marcus, he read aloud. Ruby took her first steps today. I wasn't there to see it, but Mrs. Chen from next door told me about it when she brought your aunt Sarah the pictures. She's walking toward you in every photo, like she knows you're the most important person in her world. His voice cracked. I wish I could tell you how sorry I am. I wish I could explain. But mostly, I just wish I could come home. Elena covered her face with her hands. I had someone watching from a distance, making sure you and Ruby were okay, making sure you didn't need anything. The anonymous donations to Ruby's school fund, the mysterious benefactor who paid for her art supplies every year. Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. That was you. I couldn't be her mother, but I could make sure she had everything she needed. Elena looked up at him through her tears. I've been loving her from a distance for 7 years. Marcus set the letters aside and moved to sit beside her on the couch. Elena, why didn't you come back when you turned 18? When you were old enough to make your own choices. By then, you'd built a life without me. Ruby was happy, you were successful, and I was broken. Elena leaned back against the couch cushions. I spent so many years believing I'd made the right choice, believing you were better off without me. Better off? Marcus's laugh held no humor. Elena, I spent 3 years in therapy trying to understand why the woman I loved had abandoned our child. I nearly destroyed myself trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You were perfect, and that's why I had to protect you. Marcus reached out and took her hand. The contact sent electricity through Elena's entire body. The first time he'd touched her with tenderness instead of anger. Your father destroyed our lives to protect his reputation, he said quietly. I know, and I let him. Elena turned to face Marcus fully. I was weak and scared, and I let him manipulate me into breaking both our hearts. You were protecting the man you loved. That doesn't make you weak. Elena stared at him. You don't hate me? I tried to hate you. For 7 years, I tried so hard to hate you. Marcus's thumb traced across her knuckles. But every time Ruby smiled, every time she laughed, every time she did something that reminded me of you, the hate cracked a little more. Ruby knows, doesn't she, that I'm her mother? She's suspected for weeks. She's too smart, and she has your eyes, your artistic talent, your stubborn streak. Marcus smiled sadly. She asked me yesterday if the pretty lady who teaches her about shading might be her mama. Elena's heart stopped. What did you tell her? I told her we'd talk about it soon, when I understood the whole story. Marcus squeezed her hand. Now I understand. They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, 7 years of pain slowly beginning to heal. Marcus, Elena said finally, I need you to know that I'm not asking for anything. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a place in your lives. I just needed you to know the truth. What if I want you to have a place in our lives? Elena's breath caught. What? What if I've spent 7 years waiting for you to come home? What if every woman I tried to date felt wrong because she wasn't you? What if I bought this building because this is where we fell in love, and some part of me hoped you'd find your way back here? Elena stared at him, afraid to hope. Marcus, what if I never stopped loving you, Elena? What if I just got really good at pretending I had? Before Elena could respond, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy, why is Elena crying again? They turned to see Ruby standing in the doorway in her pajamas, her hair mussed from sleep, her eyes wide with concern. Ruby, baby, you should be sleeping, Marcus said gently. I heard voices, and Elena sounds sad. Ruby padded across the room and climbed onto the couch between them. Are you sad because of the mean people trying to hurt Daddy? Elena looked at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. Ruby, Elena said carefully, do you remember asking me if I thought your mama missed you? Uh-huh. Ruby studied Elena's face, with the intense focus only children possessed. I told you that I thought your mama loved you very much, even if she couldn't be with you. I remember. Elena took a shaky breath. I said that because I am your mama, Ruby, and I have missed you and loved you every single day of your life. Ruby went very still. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, a smile that was pure joy and recognition and homecoming all at once. I knew it, she whispered. I knew it was you. Are you okay with that? Elena asked, her heart pounding. Ruby launched herself into Elena's arms with the full force of a 7-year-old who'd been waiting her entire life for this moment. I've been waiting for you, Ruby said against Elena's neck. Daddy said you went away because you weren't ready to be a family, but I always hoped you'd get ready someday. Elena held her daughter for the first time since the day she was born, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the weight of her small body, letting 7 years of grief pour out of her in great, shuddering sobs. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. It's okay, Mama. Ruby pulled back to look at Elena's face. You're here now. Marcus watched the reunion with tears streaming down his cheeks. When Ruby finally pulled away from Elena, she turned to her father with determined eyes. Daddy, now that Mama's back, she has to stay, right? We're a family now. Marcus looked at Elena over Ruby's head. That's up to your mama, baby girl. She has to decide what she wants. Elena reached for Marcus's hand while keeping one arm around Ruby. I want my family. I want you both. If you'll have me. Yes! Ruby cheered. Can Mama live here with us? Can she help me with my art projects? Can she read me bedtime stories? Slow down, sweetheart. Marcus laughed. One thing at a time. But his eyes never left. Elena's face and the love she saw there made her feel like she could fly. 3 months later, Elena stood in the completed living room of their home, watching Marcus teach Ruby how to weld a small sculpture for her school art project. The space had turned out exactly as she'd envisioned, warm, welcoming, full of love and laughter and the messy reality of family life. The custody papers had been legally overturned. Leo Vance had left town shortly after the truth came out, unable to face the social consequences of his manipulation. Preston had been charged with fraud for his role in creating the fake police documents. But Elena tried not to think about the past anymore. The present was too beautiful to waste on old pain. Mama, Ruby called from across the room. Come see what we're making. Elena joined her family at the welding station Marcus had set up in the corner. Ruby wore safety goggles that were too big for her face, and her tongue stuck out slightly as she concentrated on the metal in front of her. It's a heart, Ruby explained, but not a regular heart. It's made of 2 different metals that got broken apart, and now Daddy's helping me weld them back together so they're stronger than before. Elena looked at Marcus, who was smiling at her with eyes full of love and promises. That's beautiful, baby, Elena said, kissing the top of Ruby's head. What are you going to call it? Ruby thought for a moment, then grinned. The Return. Perfect, Marcus said, reaching out to pull Elena close. Absolutely perfect. Outside their windows, Port Haven Harbor sparkled in the afternoon sun. The old cannery had become exactly what Marcus envisioned, a place where art and love and second chances flourished. Where broken things could be made whole again, where families could find their way back to each other. Elena leaned against Marcus's shoulder and watched their daughter work, adding her own creative touches to the sculpture that represented their journey. 2 metals, broken apart by forces beyond their control, now fused together into something unbreakable. I love you, Elena whispered. I love you too, Marcus replied. Welcome home. And for the first time in 7 years, Elena was finally, truly home. The end.